Welcome, history enthusiasts, to a journey back in time to an era that laid the foundation for the America we know today. Before we dive into the heart of this fascinating story, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you won't want to miss out on the incredible tales and insights we'll be sharing. Today, we're going to explore the powerful movement that defined the early United States and continues to influence our nation, Jeffersonian democracy. This isn't just any history lesson. It's a deep dive into the ideals, struggles, and triumphs that shaped the very core of American identity. So stay tuned to the end, because what you're about to discover might just change the way you see our nation's past and present. In the late 18th century, the United States was still finding its footing as a young republic. The ink had barely dried on the Constitution, and the fledgling nation was rife with debates about how this new government should function. Among the most vocal and influential figures of this era was Thomas Jefferson, a man whose ideas would come to define an entire era of American history. Jefferson was a staunch advocate for what he called American republicanism, a set of principles centered around the belief that the government should be of the people, by the people, and for the people. He envisioned a nation where power was not concentrated in the hands of a few elites, but was instead distributed among the common citizens, the farmers, planters, and ordinary folks who made up the backbone of the nation. This vision was a radical departure from the prevailing norms of the time. The world Jefferson was born into was one where aristocracy and inherited privilege ruled the day. In Europe, monarchies reigned supreme, and in America, the remnants of these old-world structures still held sway. But Jefferson believed that America could be different. He dreamed of a republic where every citizen had a voice, where virtue and hard work were the true measures of a person's worth, not birthright or wealth. As Jefferson's ideas began to take root, they gave rise to a political movement that would come to be known as Jeffersonian democracy. This movement was more than just a set of political beliefs. It was a comprehensive vision for what America could and should be. Central to Jeffersonian democracy was a profound distrust of concentrated power, especially when it was held by those who hadn't earned it through merit. Jefferson and his followers believed that the greatest threat to the republic was an artificial aristocracy, a class of people who wielded power and influence not because of their virtues or talents, but because of their wealth or family connections. This was a direct challenge to the existing social order, which had long been dominated by elites who saw themselves as the natural rulers of society. The Jeffersonians were determined to break this cycle of power and privilege. They sought to create a more egalitarian society, where power was in the hands of the people, not a select few. This commitment to Republican ideals was reflected in their fierce opposition to corruption and their insistence on virtue as a guiding principle for public life. One of the key symbols of Jeffersonian democracy was the yeoman farmer, the independent, self-sufficient individual who worked the land and embodied the virtues of hard work, honesty, and integrity. Jefferson believed that these small farmers were the true backbone of the nation, the ones who could be trusted to uphold the values of the republic. In contrast, the Jeffersonians were deeply suspicious of urban elites, particularly merchants, bankers, and manufacturers, whom they saw as more interested in profit than in the public good. The principles of Jeffersonian democracy found their political expression in the Democratic-Republican Party, which Jefferson founded in direct opposition to the Federalist Party led by Alexander Hamilton. The Federalists, with their emphasis on a strong central government and close ties to commerce and industry, represented everything the Jeffersonians stood against. For the Jeffersonians, the Federalists were the embodiment of the aristocratic elitism they despised. They believed that Hamilton's vision for America, a nation dominated by wealthy merchants, bankers, and industrialists, was a betrayal of the revolutionary ideals that had inspired the fight for independence. Instead, the Jeffersonians argued for a decentralized government that placed power in the hands of the people and protected the rights of individuals against encroachment by the state. The rivalry between these two parties defined the early years of the American Republic. The Jeffersonians were relentless in their efforts to expand the democratic process and ensure that more Americans had a voice in their government. They fought to remove property requirements for voting, which had long restricted the right to vote to landowners, thereby excluding large segments of the population. By the end of the Jeffersonian era, this fight had borne fruit, with more than half of the states having abolished these requirements, thus expanding suffrage to virtually all white men. The expansion of voting rights during the Jeffersonian era was nothing short of revolutionary. At the beginning of the 1790s, only two states, Vermont and Kentucky, had established universal white male suffrage by abolishing property requirements for voting. This was a radical move at a time when most states still restricted voting to those who owned property, effectively limiting political participation to a wealthy minority. But Jefferson and his followers were determined to change this. They believed that the right to vote should not be tied to wealth or land ownership, but should be a fundamental right of all white male citizens. This belief was rooted in their commitment to the idea that government should be accountable to the people, and that the best way to ensure this was by giving as many people as possible a say in how they were governed. As the Jeffersonian era progressed, more and more states followed Vermont and Kentucky's lead. By the 1820s, more than half of the states had abolished property requirements for voting, making it possible for virtually all white men to participate in the political process. This was a significant step toward a more inclusive democracy, one that reflected the Jeffersonian ideal of government by the people. But the expansion of voting rights didn't stop there. The Jeffersonians also pushed for reforms to the presidential election process. Traditionally, state legislatures had chosen the electors who would vote for the president, but this method was increasingly seen as undemocratic. In response, many states began allowing the popular vote to determine how electors would be chosen. This shift toward a more direct and participatory form of democracy was a testament to the enduring influence of Jeffersonian ideals. By the time the Jeffersonian era reached its zenith, the Democratic-Republican Party had become the dominant force in American politics. Jefferson's vision of a republic governed by the people had been realized, at least in part, as his party gained control of every level of government, from state legislatures and city halls to the White House itself. This period of political dominance allowed the Jeffersonians to implement their vision for America in concrete ways. They pursued policies that promoted agricultural interests, opposed the creation of a national bank, and resisted efforts to expand federal power at the expense of the states. In doing so, they sought to create a government that was more responsive to the needs and concerns of ordinary citizens, rather than catering to the interests of a wealthy elite. But this era of Jeffersonian dominance was not without its challenges. The Democratic Republicans faced significant opposition from the Federalists, who continued to advocate for a strong central government and closer ties to commercial interests. The conflict between these two visions for America would ultimately shape the nation's political landscape for years to come. As we reflect on the legacy of Jeffersonian democracy, it's clear that this movement played a crucial role in shaping the early history of the United States. Jefferson's ideas about government, power, and the rights of individuals helped to define the nation's identity and set it on a path toward greater inclusivity and participation. While Jeffersonian democracy was not without its flaws, particularly in its exclusion of women and people of color from the democratic process, it nonetheless laid the groundwork for the continued expansion of democratic principles in the United States. The ideals of civic virtue, opposition to corruption, and the belief in government by the people remain central to the American political tradition. Today, as we continue to navigate the challenges of democracy in the 21st century, the lessons of the Jeffersonian era offer valuable insights. The emphasis on participatory government, the distrust of concentrated power, and the commitment to a more equitable society are ideas that continue to resonate. In many ways, the debates that define the Jeffersonian era are still with us as we grapple with questions about the role of government, the rights of individuals, and the balance of power in society. Thank you for joining us on this exploration of Jeffersonian democracy. The story of how a young nation struggled to define itself and its principles is a powerful reminder of the importance of staying true to the values that make us who we are. If you found this journey through history as fascinating as we did, make sure to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell. There's so much more to discover, and we can't wait to share it with you. Remember, history isn't just about the past. It's about understanding the present and shaping the future. So stay curious, stay engaged, and keep exploring.